private financial institution in Germany, Deutsche Bank, became, in the post-Herrhausen, post-Rohwedder, post-Kohl period, an appendage of one of the major City of London British Royal banking groups, Morgan Grenfell. So Germany has lost its sovereignty. And while it still remains a potential economic power in Europe, the behavior of Schäuble, the reemergence of a Nazi apparatus in Germany, is reminiscent of the British networks around Montague Norman and around American Prescott Bush that facilitated putting Hitler in power in the first place. So without this historical recollection, without this historical knowledge, how can you judge current events? How can you anticipate and, in some cases, preempt and prevent the kinds of reactions that we can expect from the British in this particular dangerous, nightmarish historical moment if we're blind to history, if we think in, quote, practical terms, if we don't understand the nature of empire through its long historic sweep? Now, as Megan mentioned briefly, you have to also look back at an even larger slice of the European history, because it bears directly on the situation in the United States.
Okay, test, checking, testing. I am blithering away, pretending to be Jeff Steinberg, and this test is probably at about 2 minutes into the link test. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Blah 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 blah. Bye bye.
The empire, at that point, the British Empire. It was the Venetian Empire and remnants of the Roman Empire and other centers of imperial power in Europe went absolutely berserk to beat back the accomplishments of the Renaissance, including the initial emergence of the system of modern nation states and then you'd have to look to Lincoln as the next great figure in American history who waged war consciously against the British Empire, who through his greenback policy and his commitment to absolute victory in the Civil War saved the Union and went back to a Hamiltonian tradition that he understood very well. What happened to Lincoln? Assassinated by the British. It was one of the most clear-cut instances of a British assassination of an American president that we've had. There were military tribunals that identified the British protective apparatus around the Confederate intelligence services that were instrumental in the Lincoln assassination. Fortunately, one of the great generals of the Civil War, Ulysses S. Grant, was elected president and did serve 2 full terms. And of course, his base of operation was New York City, and he was very conscious of, again, the Hamiltonian actual roots of the American Revolution. And then we get to the end of the 19th century, where William McKinley was the last of the American system presidents. And what happened to McKinley? Assassinated by the British in 1901.
Blah, 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 blah. Test, blah, 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 blah.
Franklin Roosevelt was elected president in 1932. Even before he was sworn into office, there was an attempt to assassinate him. And when that failed, the J.P. Morgan London interests plotted an outright military coup d'etat to overthrow Franklin Roosevelt because of the danger that he presented to the system of empire. So you've got a very clear picture if you're willing to be courageous enough to step back and learn the lessons of history, appreciate the vast majority of our fellow citizens, to put it in very blunt language, are stupid. They don't know this history. They're incapable of judging events like the 3 dramatic events that occurred just in the last 7 days. The intervention with Hillary that shed clear light on where this presidential campaign is headed. The true significance of what happened in Greece. In point of fact, nothing was accomplished. There is no new debt deal. All there is a hyperinflationary bailout of the existing bubble. There is no way in hell that the deal that was struck the other day can actually last for very long or succeed in any way, shape, or form. All that happened is that a moment of truth when the whole transatlantic system was ready to blow out. It brings down London. It brings down Wall Street. It changes the entire political correlation globally. It lines up the United States because it finishes Obama as well. Obama is simply there to defend London and Wall Street. If Glass-Steagall is passed and London and Wall Street are bankrupted, Obama's finished. And that sets the stage for the United States to accept the invitation by Chinese President Xi Jinping to directly join in the BRICS policy, the One Belt, One Road policy, and to make it a truly global alternative. So, as Mr. LaRouche emphasized at the end of our long discussion, there must be a positive perspective towards the future. Not just some Pollyanna-ish idea, but a very specific, critical flanking operation that is both feasible and timely and necessary. And happily, we have a counter trend that has begun in the last several weeks with much work going into it, where a grouping of members of the United States Senate are beginning to see the bigger picture and have recognized that Glass-Steagall is indispensable at this moment. So that's where we are, and this is why it would be really impossible and it would be actually counterproductive to speculate on the outcome or lack of outcome of the P5+1 deal. Certainly it's positive that it happened, but with the threat of thermonuclear war, with the threat of the entire dissolution of the transatlantic system as a whole, the British Empire system as a whole, it's really impossible to say how that situation is going to play out, because it's not yet situated in this larger showdown moment that we're living through right now. So.
Thank you very much, Jeff. So just to pick up on where you left things, I think the question before all of us, all of our viewers out there, is exactly that issue of human progress. Under this picture that you've just detailed, what must mankind do to move forward? And while it's necessary to identify and know the evil which has brought us to the current situation, it's not sufficient. True leadership is the ability to insert into humanity a new principle upon which mankind as a species progresses, moves forward. So with that very simply said, I'd like to ask Jason to come to the podium to address this issue.